Welcome back to the Game Collection. Over the course of my career as an RPG reviewer, few games were able to instill into me the childlike sense of adventure and wonder as well as Grandia, a heartfelt tale of exploration and love letter to the thrill of swashbuckling. So naturally I couldn't wait to get my hands on a copy of the game's sequel. But somehow I managed to hold off nearly 2 years before stepping foot into another world crafted by Game Arts' late Takeshi Miyagi. But it's finally time to give in to temptation. I am SuperDerek, and this is Grandia II. Grandia II was developed by Game Arts, some of the developers behind the Lunar series, and was released on the Sega Dreamcast in the year 2000. Grandia II takes place in a completely separate universe from the first title, so you don't have to worry about making your way through the first game before moving on to Grandia II. That said, you really ought to give the first game a chance if you haven't already. Anyway, the story follows Ryudo, the cure for everyone who's tired of that silent protagonist cliche. Ryudo is a rude and crude dude with a mind of his own that he's always ready to share, often to hilarious effect. He's a lowly sword for hire, what people of this world call a geohound. The game opens with Ryudo accepting a job to escort a songstress of Granis to a ritual in the woods. Things go about as well as you would expect, which results in this unlikely duo embarking on the adventure of a lifetime. During the development of Grandia II, the development team made the decision to make a more mature game, and on that, they delivered. The game uses that salty geohound worldview opposite that of the naive songstress to explore the subject of moral gray areas and self-determination. The game pits each character's worldview up against different scenarios, challenging both characters' sense of right and wrong. The game's central theme seems to center on the concepts of balance, taking personal responsibility for your own actions, and not being tied down by the past. The message is there, but was handled in such a way that I never felt like I was getting beaten over the head with a moral of the story. The story of Grandia II contains some really heartbreaking scenes that left me wondering if or how things could have possibly played out any better. But for the most part, sometimes bad things just happen, and that's just the sad reality. There were a few plot twists that I saw coming some 25 hours in advance, and some story elements that you might consider tired and dated by this point. A lot can happen in 17 years after all. None of this really bothered me though, because I was having far too much fun to really care. The cast of characters was endearing enough that I could have a good time just watching them eat dinner, which, as it so happens, is something that is carried over from Grandia. After making it into town and checking the place out, you get to break bread with your party members and have a roundtable discussion talking about their take on the events that are playing out. A lot of the character development in the game takes place during these candid discussions, but if you aren't careful, it's easy to miss them. This method kind of reminds me of Breath of Fire 3, when you could set up a tent for the night and talk with your party members, but a bit more fleshed out. The lighthearted discussions are something you come to cherish because neither you, the player, nor the characters in the game know when their next good meal will be, or how long the good times will last, because it seems they never do. Combat within Grandia II was lifted directly from Grandia I and left almost untouched. Why bother messing with perfection after all? The system was an interesting take on an active time battle system where the party members and enemy's turn is displayed on a bar at the bottom of the screen. As they get ready to attack, they enter their final segment of the action bar. If you attack an enemy during this segment with a critical hit or special move, you can actually cancel out their attack. A well-timed attack right before the enemy attacks will also result in a counter-attack for loads of damage too, so the battles become this game of trying to cancel enemy attacks or timing them just right to line up a critical counter-attack. Meanwhile, in the battlefield, party members and enemies are spread out and have to move across the map in order to be able to attack one another. The result of this is a fast-paced, turn-based game that has a slight tactical influence. It's a turn-based battle system that's not just fun, but addicting. And perhaps the best measure of this fact is the fact that, like Chrono Trigger, all enemies can be seen on the world map, and outright avoided if you were so inclined. However, for the majority of the game while exploring the dungeons and traversing the passages between towns, I was actively seeking out monsters to stomp. As a reward for defeating enemies, you are awarded gold and experience points and some coins. One of my few criticisms of Grandia 1 was the way in which you had to level up magic by repeatedly using it, which resulted in some odd training methods. However, these coins removed the need to grind your skills at all. Magic coins and special coins are like flexible experience points that can be spent on unlocking or improving the casting speeds of spells and techniques. One other thing they can be spent on are skills inside skill books, which is the key to getting your party to really work like a well-oiled machine. Skills in skill books can be assigned to a character, and each skill will affect certain stats or behaviors during battle that grow in effect with each level unlocked. Equipping a tank character with a maximum level decoy skill guarantees that character will be drawing all enemy attacks, while a different skill will greatly increase their dodging ability. Experimenting with these skill combinations resulted in what I like to refer to as ludicrous efficiency, to the point where by the end of the game, I had most battles play out automatically within just a few turns. Some might say that breaks the game, but you don't have to engage in that sort of thing if you don't want to. But it was a part of the game that I loved diving into just as much as the battles themselves. Dungeons in Grandia 2 are usually pretty linear. They have some interesting designs within them, and sometimes a light puzzle here or there, usually in the form of a push block puzzle. Sometimes you'll be presented with some switches that have to be hit before you can proceed, but it really wasn't a big focus of the game. The world of Grandia 2 is usually very pretty, though I can't help but feel it's a little disjointed. In between areas, you can select your destination from the region map. The world map is cleverly segmented by a giant white glowing chasm, a trench carved into a continent during a prehistoric clash of power. This rift between the lands and its people gave rise to diversity in not only cultures but in ways of thought as well, which plays well into the themes I mentioned earlier. It's refreshing to see that kind of interplay between the world's design and the game's story. On a smaller scale, the individual level designs consisting of dungeons and legs of the journey in between destinations are large and littered with hidden items. I tried to be thorough, but I'm positive that there were several items that I missed, and even some hidden areas that I didn't get to explore this time around. It was a real treat to get to see the Dreamcast flex some of its muscles during my 35-hour romp. The Dreamcast was a real powerhouse packed into such a small system. The character models were detailed and colorful in such a way that you could almost mistake them for hand-drawn sprites until you saw them in motion. One quirk in the presentation, though, that took a little getting used to is the way the camera could be zoomed in a little while standing still, but would zoom out when you started running. The camera was controlled using the shoulder buttons, which worked well for the most part, but the odd placement of the shoulder buttons kinda crimped my hands after a bit of extended play. Not a huge problem though. And I'd just like to say that Noriyuki Iwadare is the best composer of all time. I mean, objectively speaking, it wouldn't be true, but I'd still like to say it anyway. While I would say that the musical selection in Grandia 2 isn't quite as memorable as those found in Lunar and Grandia 1, it's still chock full of outstanding tracks. The hair metal inspired guitar and wailing is exactly what I love to hear while kicking the proverbial crap out of monster fodder. The music isn't just all guitars and screaming though. The peaceful vocals and musical accompaniment in Adeus sent my mind wandering into far off and magical lands. While I'm talking about the game's audio, it should be noted that the voice acting is every bit as good as the first title, maybe even a bit better. Within the game, there are some experienced voice actors you've most likely heard before. Having grown up watching the Ninja Turtles, for instance, I instantly recognized Ryudo's voice as Leonardo.
Hey, I'm Ryudo. This here's Sky. Quite a warm welcome for someone you're hiring.
What? Why are you being so rude?
The voice talent within the game was fantastic, though it did take a little while for me to disassociate Ryudo's voice actor from the Ninja Turtle. Grandia 2 went on to be ported to the PlayStation 2 a couple of years later, but suffered from a downgrade in graphical fidelity and suffered from some bugs. While probably the inferior version of the game, it's also one of the cheapest ways, costing a mere $15 for a complete copy. But that wasn't the end for Grandia 2. In August of 2015, Grandia II was ported with a higher resolution to PC for the Grandia II Anniversary Edition by Gung Ho Games. This version included the original Japanese voice acting as an option and a hard mode. It's currently available on Steam and Good Old Games for $20. If you don't really care about having a physical copy, this seems like the definitive way to experience Grandia II. However, if you were like me and you just gotta have something to hold on to and want the best possible experience for it, I'd recommend the Dreamcast version, which will cost you the most, but $35 really isn't too bad, all things considered. In an attempt to be thorough in this review, I mentioned a few things here or there that could have been improved upon. But in all honesty, those were mostly just nitpicks and things that I thought might be deal breakers for some people. But in all honesty, this game was some of the most fun that I've had in months, and it reminded me why I love to play RPGs. And of course, for all of these reasons, Grandia II has easily earned itself a spot in the game collection. Before I ended this review, I wanted to send a shout out and special thank you to my buddy Jared, who's also a patron of mine over on patreon.com, as well as a special thank you to all of my patrons. If you'd like to have access to the monthly Skype chats, behind the scenes content, or you just want to support the show, feel free to head over to patreon.com/SuperDerek. I'd be happy to see you guys there. Take care, guys.